Well, we're taking a stack of sources and diving deep into a very specific, very British literary world. I think enormous country houses, upper middle class antics, and some frankly outrageous behavior.
Mm-hmm. We're unpacking the legacy of Jilly Cooper, the queen of the Bonkbuster, following the sad news of her passing this week.
It really is a moment to look back, isn't it? She was such a fixture.
Absolutely. More than just a bestseller, though 11 million books sold is, huge. She felt like a UK national treasure. And her reach was incredible. Everyone seemed to read her, from schoolgirls hiding paperbacks to, well, even prime ministers.
Okay, let's start there maybe. For anyone who hasn't encountered the term, what exactly is a bonkbuster? It's a very British label.
It really is. Perfect description, though. Coined, I think, late 80s. For these novels that were just massive, often really long, and absolutely crammed with, well, salacious storylines and lots of sex. Frequent, often pretty explicit sex.
The name doesn't lie then.
Not at all. And the key thing everyone agrees on, the appeal was pure, unadulterated escapism.
Right. We saw former PM Rishi Sunak, who said he was a fan, put it down to exactly that, the need to just escape reality for a bit.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To figure out why this specific blend of, let's call it sex and shenanigans, among the sort of horsey set, was so irresistible for so long.
And also how her work reflected and sometimes clashed with shifting ideas about women and pleasure. It's quite complex when you look closely.
Definitely. But you have to start with the visuals, don't you?
Oh, the covers. If you were around in the 80s or 90s, you just knew them. They were everywhere. Passed around almost like contraband. They're sort of burned into your memory.
They really are. Marketing genius, in a way. So suggestive. Writers is the classic, right? The woman in the tight white jawed purse.
And the man's hand resting very deliberately on her backside.
Exactly. And then rivals that bright red stiletto heel grinding into a man's hand. They just screamed, "Scandal awaits."
And the power of that imagery. I mean, tell us about the reissue story. That's amazing.
Oh, it's brilliant. So Riders gets reissued in 2015. And the readers, the hardcore fans, were apparently aghast.
Aghast, why?
Because the publisher had moved the man's hand, shifted it up a few inches onto her hip, basically. A less provocative spot.
No way.
Yes. And Cooper herself was reportedly livid about it, too.
They moved the hand slightly, and people freaked out. That shows some serious dedication to the original vibe.
It does, doesn't it? It wasn't just the hand itself, I think. It was what it symbolized. That original cover was a promise this is going to be daring, a bit naughty.
Right?
Sanitizing the cover felt like, well, like betraying the slightly cheeky, scandalous spirit of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It showed how deeply people connected to that original, slightly rebellious feel.
So, okay, you get past the cover. What's the world inside? These irresistible sagas, always set among England's upper middle class.
Usually the rural horsey set, yeah. Dashing cads, ambitious women.
And always loads of animals, right? Horses, hounds.
Definitely. And huge country houses. But the key thing, despite all the high drama, was the tone. It's always described as, well, rather jolly.
Jolly melodrama.
Sort of. It never took itself too seriously. You're watching these incredibly privileged people behave appallingly, but it's all meant to be fun, lighthearted.
And that formula really hit big time with Riders in '85. That kicked off the Rutshire Chronicles. Rutshire, this fictional county.
Inspired by Gloucestershire, yeah. And Riders was all about the world of showjumping, the rivalries, the fallouts, the frolicking.
And crucially, Riders is where we meet the character who defines the whole series, isn't he? Rupert Campbell Black.
Oh, yes. The ultimate anti-hero. Infamous Lothario, brilliant horse trainer, just dripping with charisma and bad behavior.
And apparently partly inspired by a real person, Andrew Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's ex-husband.
That's the rumor, yeah. Seems plausible given the circles she moved in. Rupert is, well, he's the magnetic center of that universe, for better or worse.
So Riders was show jumping, but the sequels branched out, right? Keeping the characters, but changing the setting.
Exactly. She took that same template, the elite, playing scandalous games, the same core cast popping up, and moved it into other glamorous worlds. You had art, classical music, the TV industry, polo. It kept things fresh but familiar.
And she kept it going for decades. Her 18th novel, Tackle, the 10th in the series, only came out last year, 2023. And this time it was professional football.
Yeah, which sounds like an odd fit at first. Maybe. But the story behind it is great. Apparently she had lunch with Sir Alex Ferguson.
The football manager.
The legendary manager, yeah. And she was just fascinated by that world. So the fictional team, Searston Rovers, was loosely based on her local team, Forest Green Rovers, famous for being very eco-conscious.
Ah, okay. That's quite a mix.
Isn't it? And the names. She always had such fun with names. You get players called like Farrell Jackson or Midas Channing. Wags named Daffodil Clark Rogers. It's part of that infectious, slightly over-the-top charm.
And that charm obviously worked across the board, because despite the very posh settings, her readers were incredibly diverse. Academics at Cambridge, apparently, crime writers like Ian Rankin loved her. Men, women.
Could really cut across demographics.
Yeah.
Which suggests it tapped into something deeper than just, titillation.
What was that deeper thing, do you think?
Well, Amy Burge, who studies this stuff, popular fiction, she points out that the Bonkbusters did something quite important back then. They acknowledged that sex is a big part of life, that it can be fun, complicated, all kinds of other things, as she put it.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The idea that for many women, particularly those growing up when these books were huge, they acted as a kind of emotional sex education.
That's a really powerful point raised by author Daisy Buchanan. She's a huge fan and explicitly calls Cooper's books her emotional sex education.
Wow.
Yeah. She says Cooper was one of the first writers she encountered who talked openly about women wanting pleasure, seeking it out for themselves.
And it wasn't just clinical descriptions, right? The sources say the sex was often shown as tender, joyful, and loving. It had feelings attached.
Exactly. It wasn't just mechanics, that emotional weight. And crucially, the heroines weren't perfect goddesses.
Right. Buchanan makes that point about them triumphing even while worrying about their spots or whatever.
Yes. The message was, you don't need to be some flawless ideal to deserve or enjoy great sex, great relationships. It was escapist, sure, but with relatable feelings woven in. That's quite empowering in its way.
Okay, so there's the fun, the escapism, the surprising empowerment. But we have to talk about the other side. The parts of the legacy that feel difficult now.
Absolutely. It's crucial. This body of work spans, 4 decades? Things change.
Right.
And while there was lots of fun, not everything in those books was fun or, frankly, consensual.
The sources are pretty blunt about this. Rapes, sexual assaults happen in the plots, and the criticism is that it is very rare that the rapist has any kind of comeuppance.
Yes. And this brings us back to Rupert Campbell Black, the hero. He's presented as charming, irresistible. But there are specific scenes described as horrible, like one in Riders where he coerces his wife Helen into a sex act.
That's really tough to square with him being the romantic hero people rooted for. How did that work? How do readers enjoy a story where the hero does something like that?
I think it goes back to that idea of escapism as a contract. When you pick up one of these books, you're entering a kind of moral playground. Rupert's a cad, he does terrible things.
Okay.
But the narrative presents him as the alpha, the one everyone desires. So the reader is sort of given permission within that fantasy world to find him appealing, despite his actions. Real-world accountability doesn't really apply. Glamour excuses a lot in Rutshire.
And Cooper's own comments later in life seem to lean into that disconnect from modern views on consent.
Somewhat, yeah. In 2023, talking about the #MeToo movement, she said it made people tense and anxious about sex and added, I don't think people are having nearly as much fun. It reinforces that feeling that her fictional world operated by different, maybe older rules where pleasure sometimes steamrollered complexity. And you see it, too, in how feminists were often portrayed in her books, rarely sympathetically, sometimes reduced to stereotypes like having hairy legs. It's definitely fiction from a different time in terms of sexual politics.
So, thinking about the future, Cooper really felt like the last bastion of that original 80s, 90s Bonkbuster wave, didn't she? With Jackie Collins, Judith Krantz, Shirley Conran all gone now, too. Is the genre itself fading?
Well, the landscape's definitely changing. Interestingly, Cooper herself apparently found writing the sex scenes quite difficult later on. Tackle was apparently a bit tamer in that department.
And that fits with some wider trends, maybe?
It could do. There's that UCLA study suggesting many in Gen Z actually want less sex on screen, more focus on platonic relationships, and maybe the core demand for that kind of explicit content is shifting.
But hang on, that sounds like the end of saucy books. But then you look at social media.
Exactly. It's not dead, it's just evolved. The craving for romance and escapism is still huge. Look at TikTok. The #SpicyBooks hashtag has billions of views. It's driving massive sales for authors like Colleen Hoover.
So the appetite is still there, just maybe in a different package.
Seems like it. And fans, like Daisy Buchanan again, argue that newer writers, people like Abby Jimenez, Akweki Emezi, Melania Blake, are carrying that torch. They're writing really fun, genuinely erotic stuff, but perhaps with more modern attention to emotional depth and clear consent. They want the pure sauce, as Buchanan puts it, but maybe with more care.
And proof that the core stories still work is the Rivals adaptation on Disney Plus, Stitcha, right? That was a hit.
Huge hit. Pulled in a whole new audience.
Yeah.
Which shows the basic ingredients, the class clashes, the drama, the outrageous characters still land.
And that adaptation perfectly highlights the shift, doesn't it? Because of all the sex, Disney Plus hired not one, but two intimacy coordinators for the set.
Right. Making sure all that famous bonking was filmed professionally and respectfully. A process that just wasn't really a thing when the books first came out.
And the actors still had fun. Aidan Turner said it was the most fun he'd had on a job.
Which suggests the essential spirit that melodramatic, slightly wicked, jolly fun can survive, even when produced through a modern lens with modern safeguards.
Okay, so wrapping this up, Jilly Cooper leaves this dual legacy, doesn't she? On one hand, mass escapism, pure unapologetic fun, and for some readers, a genuinely positive way to think about female desire. But on the other hand, embedded within that are these really problematic elements, especially around coercion and consent, that absolutely reflect the era they were written in, but jar significantly now.
A complex picture.
Definitely. Which leads us to the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We see this massive success of modern spicy books, often built on clear consent and emotional connection. So the question is, can that original, carefree, slightly transgressive Bonkbuster joy be fully recaptured in new fiction without addressing those historical issues of coercion head-on? Can the fantasy survive the reality check? That's a really tricky balancing act for writers going forward, a fascinating legacy to consider. Thank you for diving deep with us today.